You are listening to The Memory Keeper by Evan Vaile. Chapter 11.
Several minutes before Carol Kenny was tragically killed in what would later become known as one of the world's worst subway accidents, Reece Nylander was 40 meters below her, strapped to a stretcher and being conveyed to an operating theatre by two masked medical staff and one guard. The familiar, brightly lit corridors whipped past Reece's eyes as he lay face down, the offending fork still sticking out of his back. His wrists and ankles were tightly secured to the sides of the stretcher to prevent him from being bad. He knew where they were taking him. He'd been patched up in the infirmary countless times. But at that moment, his thoughts were totally centered on warning the doctor about Ratboy's plan to bring catastrophe down on them all. Unfortunately, the doctor was not amenable to his pleas, and so he fell to murmuring over and over the one thought that dominated his mind. "Stop the trains," he kept muttering. "You've got to stop the trains." He saw a door frame pass by, and then the white linoleum of the corridor broadened out and became the speckled pattern of the floor in the operating theatre. The room was white and windowless, mostly cold stainless steel and glass cabinets, and permeated by that peculiar sterile smell he had come to loathe. He was parked beside an operating table and left there while the doctor and the nurse walked away, talking in hushed tones. Reece sensed the guard was standing somewhere behind him, near the door. His awareness of his surroundings was limited to what he could see of the floor and what he could hear going on around him. A pair of white shoes stepped into his field of view, and he recognized the voice of the doctor standing over him. "It's a shallow wound. A local will be enough," the masked doctor instructed. "We'll shift him up onto the table now." "Stop the trains," Reece implored. "He's going to kill everyone." His entreaties were greeted with silence from those around him. The staff were trained to ignore the subject's mad utterances. The restraints were released, and then he felt rough hands take hold of him. He was lifted off the stretcher and dumped on the cold operating table. His wrists and ankles were immediately resecured. The sharp sting of a needle in his shoulder caused him to frown, and he guessed the doctor had administered a local anesthetic. While the doctor worked, the nurse studied the teenager on the table and thought of the rumors she had heard about him. She knew that he wasn't violent, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw only candor. None of the others were like that, and every one of them scared her, especially the one called Ratboy. The nurse chewed on her bottom lip, thinking. Nylander just didn't seem to be like the rest of them. "Doctor, is it possible Ratboy could crash the trains?" she asked suddenly. "It is possible," Reece interrupted, trying to turn his head. "The deacon told him." "Shut up!" The doctor's eyes never rose from his work. "No, of course it's not possible," he replied. "In fact, it's ridiculous. You really shouldn't listen to what the subjects say. They are crazy, all of them. Scissors." She passed him the scissors. "It is possible," Reece reiterated. "Another word out of you, 202, and I will sew your mouth shut," the doctor hissed. He never called the subjects by their pet names, preferring to address them by their designated numbers. "Doctor, perhaps we should contact—" the nurse began. "Look, nurse, I told you, this one's delusional," the doctor said, pointing at the patient on the table to add emphasis to his words. "After I've finished sewing him up, I'll give him a sedative, and that will keep him quiet for a while. And if I hear one more word out of you, I'll have you removed from this theatre. Have I made myself clear?" The nurse averted her eyes and murmured, "Yes, doctor." "All right, let's sit him up so I can bandage the wound," the doctor ordered. The pair unbuckled the restraints on Reece's wrists and ankles. Free of his leash, he flexed his limbs to encourage the blood to flow. The masked doctor gave him a swift poke in the ribs to get him moving, and he sat up on the table, surreptitiously casting his eyes around the room. The doctor and the nurse were concealed and anonymous behind their white surgical masks, with only their eyes visible. The guard had moved to the end of the operating table and was watching Reece intently, his fingers playing lightly over the butt of his shotgun. His thin smile was cold, mean, dangerous. Reece looked away, disinterested. The doctor pressed a piece of cloth over the stitches and then proceeded to wrap a bandage around his ribs to hold the gauze in place. When he was finished, the nurse passed him a pre-prepared syringe. She tried not to look into the subject's blue eyes as she did so, but try as she might, she felt her eyes drawn to his. She felt a tingle race through her young body as his bright gaze touched hers and didn't slip away. There was something about him, something sincere, something... She knew the inmates believed he had some kind of clairvoyant power, though the program had never found any evidence of it. Behind her mask, she took a deep breath, entranced. Suddenly, the whole room began to shake, and the nurse glanced around in alarm. The medical instruments on the tray beside the operating table clattered together noisily, and she jumped back when the glass doors on the cabinets began to shatter one after another, spilling razor-sharp shards all over the floor. The fluorescent lights flickered on and off, and the floor shuddered so violently that it became difficult for the three of them to stand. The guard gripped the table, and the doctor tried to pick his way over to a bench top, still holding the syringe. Reece knew what he was hearing, but for a moment didn't believe it. Just before the lights went out and his world changed forever, he remembered what Ratboy had told him in the feeding room earlier. The trains are coming. Hundreds will be killed. Jesus Christ, he breathed, too softly to be heard over the incredible din. He looked up at the ceiling as if to stare through the concrete and see the carnage occurring above. The crazy sons of bitches have actually done it. Then the fluorescent globes exploded and the room was thrown into total darkness. The doctor tried in vain to scream orders over the tremendous roar, but couldn't make himself heard. In the confusion, Reece slipped off the table and stole away. The panicking guard managed to fumble out his torch, his hand shaking as much from fear as from the vibrating ground. Its bright beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the masked doctor still holding the syringe. The veins in his neck were jutting angrily, and his mouth was moving, but the guard couldn't hear a word he was saying. The doctor gave up and reached through the smashed glass of a cabinet to retrieve a torch for himself. But when he shone the beam at the operating table, there was no sign of the subject. "Shit!" the doctor screamed uselessly. He spun around, playing his torch beam under the benches. The floor was slippery and crunchy with broken glass, and he moved forward carefully. Then he spotted Nylander, on the other side of the room, caught like a deer in the headlights of an oncoming car. Suddenly, the ceiling exploded as a huge block of concrete crashed through, obliterating the operating table which Reece had been seated on only moments ago. The hapless guard was killed instantly, standing at the wrong place at the wrong time, squashed flat beside the table. The nurse was standing far enough away to be left with a lingering death. Her legs were crushed beneath the monster block, and she was trapped on the floor while rubble rained down on her. Still conscious, she weakly held up her arm to fend off the shower of small concrete pieces plummeting down from above. Reece and the doctor were knocked to the floor by the impact of the concrete meteor. With the guard dead and his double D-size battery torch flattened, only the doctor's flashlight remained to break the darkness. He rose slowly and stared at the struggling form of the nurse. By the light of his torch, he could see her legs were somewhere beneath the concrete block. Her green eyes shone in the light, pleading with him desperately. She's gone, he decided, and holding the syringe high like a knife, he moved in on Nylander. With the torchlight shining directly in his eyes, Nylander was almost blind. The doctor was a vague silhouette half a dozen steps away. He couldn't see if the door to the operating theatre was open or shut, and didn't want to risk being trapped against a locked door by the syringe-wielding doctor. So he warily moved out into the middle of the room and waited for the crazy physician to follow. Reece remembered the doctor telling the nurse to prepare a sedative and correctly guessed that that was what the syringe contained. Perhaps by trying to stick him, the doctor thought he was doing his duty. In any event, Reece wasn't sure and didn't care. The masked man hovered close, trying to determine how to best handle subject PXS-202. Gee, the subjects are a lot larger when they're standing up, the doctor realized. Strapped down to stretchers and sedated, they look a lot smaller and easier to control. 202 must be over 6 feet tall and healthy, far too healthy. We should have done something about that years ago. All the subjects have been putting on too much weight. The doctor lunged, but quickly learned his mistake. His effort was clumsy, and no match for the likes of Nylander. Reece was young and fast, and had grown up in an environment designed to kill him. He'd been tested in every way a young man could be tested, and he'd triumphed. He'd survived because he was swift and cunning, and no middle-aged man living the soft life could ever hope to better him in hand-to-hand combat. Reece easily sidestepped the doctor's attack and grabbed hold of the hand with the syringe. With a sharp jerk, he broke the surprised physician's wrist and let the ill-conceived weapon fall to the floor. The frightened doctor tried to club him with the torch, but Reece grabbed hold of the annoying hand with a vice-like grip and twisted it behind the doctor's back. In many ways, the doctor should have counted himself lucky. After all, Reece had no intention of killing him, though if he'd been at the mercy of any of the other inmates, he would have had a terrible death to look forward to. Nevertheless, Reece couldn't resist giving him a serve. After divesting him of the torch, Reece picked the petrified doctor up and threw him along one of the benches, in the direction of the door. The doctor's head swept medical equipment off the bench top, and then he landed heavily on the floor, cut and bruised. Watching him fight for air, Reece wondered if the little man thought he was going to die. Perhaps if he had read his files more closely, he would have known that in his 2 years at the program, Reece had never killed a single soul. The doctor scrambled to his feet, coughing, a stain appearing in the crotch of his white pants, testimony to his fear. When Reece made no move toward him, the doctor scurried for the door, pushed it open, and fled for his life. Left in the quiet of the operating theatre, Reece turned the flashlight to the nurse, lying on the floor, still alive. She looked up at him, her expression strangely calm. Reece's bare feet were cut and bleeding. The new stitches in his shoulder wound had started to pop out, and his blue trousers were torn at the knees. His chest was bare, sweat-stained and covered in concrete dust. With his shaved head, he did indeed look like an unsavory criminal. Taking care not to blind her with the torchlight, he crouched down beside the dying nurse. He was no doctor, but even he could see that she was in a bad way. She had a huge block of concrete on her, and the only way to get her out would be to tear her out. Lifting the block was out of the question. Wiping the sweat from his face, he stared, not knowing what to say. She began to struggle to take off her white surgical mask, so he helped her slide it down over her chin. An idle part of his mind saw that she was very pretty. He wondered how much older than him she was. All of the medical staff were ageless and anonymous behind their masks, and he had never actually seen one of their faces before. He stared, and she stared back. They were inches apart, yet their existences were polar opposites. "Your legs," he began finally, indicating the veritable wall of concrete in front of her. "It's too heavy. I can't lift it." She swallowed and found her voice. "I can't feel anything," she said softly. "Perhaps I can get you some help," Reece suggested. But she started shaking her head even before he had finished answering. Her fading green eyes remained fixed on his. "No, how?" she asked weakly. "They won't listen to you." "There's still time," Reece began to say. "No, don't leave me here, Nylander," she said, as if testing his name. "Can I ask you something?" Reece nodded. "Is it true about your clairvoyance?" she whispered. Reece looked away. "No," he replied. The nurse's pained expression momentarily shifted to one of sadness. "Oh," she said wistfully, after a long while. "The other subjects think it's true. They say you can see a person's soul, that you can see their memories. Can you see my memories?" Reece looked back at her. She was compelling in her dying moments, totally unconcerned with her own welfare. But then he heard himself lying to her. He couldn't help it. He always lied about this. "No, I'm just an ordinary guy," he said quietly. "Apart from being locked in here." "Yes," she said. "Look, if you don't give up, they'll be able to get you out from under this," he exclaimed. "I bet they have equipment to break it up. Help is probably already on the way." But she wasn't listening. "It was Ratboy, wasn't it?" she mused. "He crashed the trains, like you said?" "I think so," he replied. She nodded, feebly. "Like you said," she repeated. "Nylander, I want to tell you something. There is a man, an old man, who visits the program sometimes. He's not one of the staff. I don't know his name, but he has a high security clearance. The staff only know him as Visitor 42. He keeps an eye on you. He's been coming since the beginning. If you find him, he will help you." "Who is he?" Reece asked. He could hear the precious life slipping from her voice. "I don't know. I'm sorry about all this. What we've done to you." Her voice trailed off with her final breath, and her sightless green eyes stared ahead. Reece saw her chest stop its regular rise and fall, and he was suddenly intimately aware of his own beating heart. He stood, looking down at her. From beyond the open door, He could hear the chaos of fire and damnation descending over everything and everyone. He switched his torch off, casting a black veil between himself and the room, and waited. There was no joy in his patience, only acceptance of what was about to happen. After a time, the body of the nurse was no longer dark, but glowed faintly blue and silver. Soon it began to shimmer, illuminating the room with a metaphysical light that left no shadow untouched and cast Reece in an eerie, soft luminescence. He stepped back, giving the soul room to move. It slowly rose from the body of the nurse, turning in the air and hovering just above her. This translucent image of the nurse was whole, complete, uninjured. It drifted upwards, but seemed to Reece somehow reluctant to leave. The soul's expression perplexed him. It seemed surprised, as it looked down at its own body, but showed no pain. It blinked at Reece once, twice. He stared at it, unsure if he should speak, or if he did, what he should say. The spirit sailed higher, pulled toward the ceiling by something that even Reece's transcendental sight could not see. Just before it soared beyond this realm and to another time and place, it reached out with both hands as if to embrace the world. Dozens of tiny sparkles trailed from its fingertips, falling like diamonds through the air. Reece watched them spill toward the ground, and when he looked up, the soul was gone. All that remained of her was the sprinkle of stars floating gently about the room, spread like constellations in the night sky. They scattered past him, on all sides, moving in straight lines, not touching him. He reached for one. It was radiant. He touched it with his fingertips. He felt nothing, but its light faded. Suddenly, countless images raced through his mind, so fast he was swept away. The room melted around him, and he saw every detail of the nurse's life, from birth to death, in the blink of an eye. The images he witnessed were her memories, her whole life, seen through her own eyes. He beheld it all, her friends and family, her laughter and tears, the good times and the bad, her hopes and dreams and bitter disappointments, every day and every event that had ever held enough significance for her to remember it. In her memories, he watched himself talking, saying all the things he had said to her only moments ago. He understood how she felt, about him, about the program, about everything. He knew what she knew, her medical training, the books she'd read, the places she'd visited, the people she'd met. He knew what she knew about the program, its history, and the layout of the facility. He saw clearly an image of the visitor she had tried to tell him about before she died. Her life became an open book to him, filled with countless photographs, vivid in every detail. Her memories were grafted into his mind, arranging themselves among his own memories without his control, and in a way that modern medicine was unable to explain. In giving her memories to him, she never relinquished ownership of them, only possession. He became their keeper, to remember her as she truly was. A picture tells 1,000 words, and a memory 1,000 pictures. Her life was his to know, and she gave her many moments freely, willingly. They were soul memories, a departing gift from the dead to the living, a forget-me-not, truer than one's own child. For memories want to live on, just as genes do, and the expression of that desire is a soul memory. Whether or not he would ever pass them on to another, Reece didn't know. It had taken him many years to understand his unique telepathic power, and he'd seen many soul memories. His mind was filled with them, all remembered in perfect clarity. He'd seen the lives of dozens of people, mostly inmates, killed in the violence of the feeding rooms. Soul memories that were painful and filled with hate. He suspected that he would never know why he had this strange ability or what he was supposed to do with it. But that didn't matter. For now, accepting it was enough. Flicking the torch back on, he looked around one last time, then turned and left the room.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.